All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's a few minutes after 1, so we'll go ahead and get started and make sure we stay on track and stay on time. I appreciate you all being here. As I'm looking at my screen, I've got a couple of pages worth of people. Some of you, rotate from page to page, but it looks like we're in the neighborhood of about 26 according to the bottom of my screen. So thank you all for being here very much. Um, I'm seeing some familiar names, many of us from HR. So those of you that were kind of hanging out here listening to us banter back and forth, thank you for your patience. The rest of us, I see Cindy again, and Cindy, I appreciate you being here. I'm seeing a couple of other folks that we've seen in the past. So our thanks to you for showing up and being here. It really means a lot to us that you take this time to spend with us on these hour-long sessions, be it either Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday afternoon. It is important to us that you're here, and I guess helps us make sure that we're making hitting the mark and making a difference. So thank you all for being here very much. We are recording, as you know, as I've said. Also, you'll find all of our sessions and all of our materials on the HR website. If you go to the HR website, there's the COVID-19 resources tab or section down on the left-hand side. You click that, you'll discover something called telecommuting resources, and that's where we have all of our information. We're recording all these sessions we do on either Tuesdays or Wednesdays. So if you did happen to miss one a while back or wish to view one again, you have access to them there. You have access to some things we're putting out on Monday, just little quick pieces of information on Monday. There's a pre-recorded bit of information on Thursday where we try to expand a little bit on some of the things we're doing on Wednesday afternoons. And then we're also producing a newsletter on Fridays. So that is there as well. So please take advantage of all the work we're doing and take a look at that, and then let us know if there's anything else you think you need, or if you need follow-up on anything we've done to this point and you'd like to discuss it further, please don't hesitate to let us know. For those of you who are not familiar with myself, and I'm thinking that many of you probably are by now, but I'll continue to do this. I'm Will Pliskanka. I'm the Manager of Learning and Organizational Development, and we are located in the main HR area on campus when we're at work. Right now we're located in Carnes and on Raindrop Lane, maybe. I may have gotten that wrong already. And Lucky Clover Lane. So look them up, you'll figure out where we are. But we're here, and we're glad to be a part of these sessions with you. So thank you all for being here. Thank you also to our leadership, Izetta and Mary, for allowing us this opportunity to be with you today and share this information. So as I'm looking at my screen now today, over there, and I may be pointing at somebody else, but I'm looking at Audrey, who's our training coordinator, and right over there, I happen to be looking at Jeannie, who's our learning and organizational development consultant. And I'm guessing you all can hear me because I haven't heard anything yet that I'm muted. I'm beginning to get used to the fact that at some point in time today, I'll say something and my microphone will be muted. So somebody will have to tell me I'm muted, and then I'll have to say it all again. But I appreciate you all for being here. Thank you so much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. So hopefully you can see on your screen what I'm looking at on mine, which is the notion of and the concept or topic of prioritization, and the notion of what's next. What are we working on? How are we going to set priorities? It's become a much more complicated moment as we are home and as we can't very well or easily or without great justification leave the house, and all the people we happen to be home with us in the house are in that same moment. So telecommuting takes a whole different tact when we talk about the fact that we are in it right now, and we can't necessarily escape some of the things that are here at home with us, or the things that are here at home with us don't have other places to go also. So it does create a special complexity, I guess you might say, for us, and a special way to begin thinking about some of these things. Okay, so as we dig into it, we're going to try our best to hit these objectives today, and those being identify how thoughtful priorities and setting those lead to getting the right things done. We want to articulate how this prioritization creates effective and productive workdays, and then apply again. Always, that's where when we end up and finish up here, we take this information and hopefully we apply it to our work and apply it to our days. And if we see that it works well, we get some confidence in that. Um, we note that, we remember that next time. And if it doesn't work as well as we hoped it might, we think about that and we think about ways in which we can hopefully make it work better next time. So continuing to refine and reflect on what we do, or reflect and refine what we do, to try and make this process of prioritization a little bit better for all of us as we continue to work through this situation. So we started this week with our Monday, our Mindset Monday. So if you go on the HR website and through that process I mentioned earlier about getting to telecommuting resources, this is what we had for you on Monday, and that is people who can focus get things done, and people who can prioritize get the right things done. So this is where I would like, and we like, to open it up for you folks. And this is your opportunity to unmute your mics and share a little bit about what you think that quote might mean for you. Think of what maybe you've seen as it relates to that quote. What kind of experience do you have with that type of thing? But just share your thoughts with us as we begin to dig into what prioritization means right now. And certainly, if you feel more compelled, you can utilize the chat feature also, and we'll kind of expose on that in addition. But please let us know what you think.
Hi, this is Brooke, and I'll jump in real quick. What it's meant to me in the past is being able to discern between important, urgent, and go from there. And there are some things that are urgent and need to be done immediately. There's also the important that need to be prioritized as the first steps. I may not be articulating myself very well, but the key words are urgent and important, and knowing what those things are.
Yeah, that Brooke, thank you. That's a couple of key points, and we'll touch on that as we work into this a little bit more. But yeah, that very notion of what's urgent and what is important, and those are two very different definitions, if you will, because everybody comes at each particular task with their own perspective and their own specific needs, and it is very important to discern between those two things. So thank you very much. Thank you. Anyone else?
One thing that stood out to me, Brooke, in what you said too, is that word discern. Like, that's an active process of really having to think through. And there's, from where I sit in this current situation, there's so much that I feel like I'm thinking through continuously. So when we talk about prioritization being a little bit more complex, or at least at the minimum different than those 8 hours in an office, that discernment definitely for me has taken more energy and more time, and it's definitely what I feel like is a more active process.
Yes. All right. So as we think about prioritization, kind of in a traditional sense, I'm going to ask you folks, why is that? I mean, Brooke, you touched on urgent and important, but why do we have to discern between those two things? I guess I'm going to ask you, that's a pretty big question, but what's kind of the overarching, I'm aiming for something and I'm looking for something, but what's kind of the overarching thought on why we have to discern what those differences are? What's something that we have to deal with on a daily basis? What's a limited resource we have?
Well, definitely a limited resource would be our time. And our focus would be on the things that are important, but prioritizing would fall, the urgent things would fall under the prioritizing, the priority items that you have to spend your limited time on.
Thank you. As you can see on the screen, you got, I led you nicely, or I said more than I needed to, but yeah, that's it. We have limited time. We can't get time back. I mean, we're all, you know, I have thought many times in the past, wouldn't it be great if I could cycle back 10 years knowing what I know now? But truly, we don't have the freedom or the ability or the privilege, I guess, of getting any of this time back. And that's one of the things that's so very important to us as we do this work is the very notion that folks are here spending their time with us, be it either in this context or if we were on campus in a room somewhere with other folks in a live setting or an in-person setting. But yeah, this is something we can't get back. So we have to truly identify how it is we're managing our time, how it is we're allocating our time. Hopefully we're not wasting time. We're not focusing on things that maybe aren't the best to be focused on. And time gets away from us. Time slips through our hands, just like we see in this graphic. It kind of evaporates and disappears, and the next thing you know, it's gone. As I think about it, it's hard for me to believe that we've been in this context for almost a month now. It doesn't feel like it's been that long at times, but it also feels like at times it's been longer than that, in the sense of what we're dealing with and what we're interacting with. So it's different. It's difficult, and time is something we truly do have to manage. We have to focus on the things that are important, focus on the things that we need to focus on, focus in the areas that are going to help us both professionally and personally, and use that time wisely, so we're not struggling to keep up, and we're not struggling to I guess squeeze too many things into a tiny spot. Brooke made a comment about treating too many things as urgent, and it pulls you in too many different directions at once. Yeah, I've been there. I think we probably all have been there at some point in time, thinking that this was important and urgent, and the next thing comes up moments later. We also think that's important and that's urgent, and then the next one comes up, and we continue to work through that in our minds. And it's not only tiring physically to focus on so much all at once and try and get so much done all at once, but it also it's tiring mentally to do that. So we do have to keep ourselves in check, as I've seen in the comments here as well. Does anyone have any other comments about this particular moment? Okay. Well, we're going to work through an adaptation, if you will. Some of you may be familiar with Stephen Covey's work on prioritization, and Brooke, you alluded to it intentionally or unintentionally when you're talking about urgent and important. So if you look at this particular graphic, these are things that ultimately fall within those 4 quadrants. And if you look at it, you can see at the bottom of each one of those, it talks about important and urgent, important but not urgent, urgent and not important or urgent. So Brooke hit on that as she was talking about it. But if we look at that, and the one thing that the Covey's material didn't have that I thought was really good about this material is it's got those big, bold, black words up at the top as well that talk about how we can best serve ourselves if we're seeing things that fall or experiencing assignments or wants or wishes that fall within these particular quadrants. So things like important and urgent, crises and pressing problems. So how can we truly, our goal would be to manage those, okay? In quadrant 2, focus on strategic or strategies and values. Those are important, but those are not necessarily those things that are urgent that need to be done right away or quickly. That's the kind of place where we think about what are our goals for the future? What are our goals for a day or two from now? What are our goals for a week or two from now? Okay. And then number 3, area 3, those are urgent but not important. So sometimes those come to us from other people, things that must be done or dealt with or are being asked to be done and dealt with, but they aren't necessarily things that are incredibly important. Okay. And then number 4, the trivial and the wasteful. So these are things that truly we're doing because we want to do, maybe. They're things that may help us through a moment, which is important, but also when we're dealing with or thinking about how we prioritize for work and prioritize for what's important for us, those are not necessarily things that truly give us a product on the back side. They're important, and we'll talk about this. And this is one of the things I was struggling with as I was interacting with this content a little bit because of where we are right now and the very notion that we are in a place where sometimes we need to escape and we need to minimize stress. So I don't want anyone to get the idea that these are not important to us necessarily, or that we have to limit this. But when we're truly talking about work and talking about being productive in our jobs, those are the places where we can get a little off track and we can waste time. So those are things we would need to think about in that context. So it's a tough balance that we're dealing with right now as we engage in this and as we think about priorities and we think about these 4 quadrants. Not any one of these things is designated to have hard, firm lines. All this stuff is going to kind of peel and or bleed into other areas as well. So these are things that we need to think about and things we need to be aware of as we continue to work in this fashion. So if we think about these 4 quadrants in our personal life, these may be examples of some of those. So look at these and tell me, do these make sense to you? Have you seen any of these recently? Have you seen them yesterday, today, the day before, this morning, 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, whatever it happened to be? And share something with us, please. Let us know how it entered your world and how you reacted in that time.
I have zero problem ripping off the Band-Aid with the whole meal planning. I feel like I have cooked 758 meals in 3 days, and I'm not a good cook. So, but yes, just that meal planning piece of trying to navigate lunch for me and all of my coworkers here in my home, and fixing a meal that pleases everyone, and then the snack that soon then follows the meal that pleases everyone. So and then the cleanup of the meals and the snacks. that pleases everyone. So just that whole process and in the personal context that's immersed in the middle of my telecommuting work time. So it's a challenge in terms of prioritization and staying focused. I see that word focused because it's definitely shifting in between roles really simultaneously. And so being able to shift and still have energy and focus.
I've had difficulty turning off my work, taking off my work hat and putting on my personal hat, and vice versa. Like, I could prioritize all day long and have a schedule and know what I'm doing, but I find myself, even after work hours, it could be 7 o'clock at night and we're sitting down to eat, and I think, oh, I have one more thing I have to do before my work day is over. There's just no beginning and no end of anything for me. So I'm having a problem even prioritizing within the priorities.
This is Isetta. The avoid box, especially the phone ringing. And for me, I have, well, as I think about it, the only family I have in Tennessee right now is Larry. Everyone else is outside of the state, which means that I've not seen them in a while and can't see them and won't be able to see them in a while. So whenever I get the phone call from one of them, I have to answer in order to determine if the level of importance. So unfortunately, that box becomes a little bit more of a challenge, because if family from outside the state is calling, regardless of what's going on, if I'm in the middle of a Zoom meeting or whatever, I need to take the call, because in this day and time, or even in pre-COVID-19, I would not be able to determine the importance of it until I actually gave in to the interruption.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think really, as you look at this box, and when I said earlier, they all kind of bleed into each other. Some of this stuff bleeds into each other. Isetta, that in your avoid, that's a part of your manage in that moment. Is that phone rings and you look at who it might be, because you got the idea and you know who's calling, and it's like, okay, I have to get with this in this moment. Whereas like right now, I'm thinking about avoid. I don't have my email up on screen anywhere. I got my screens up. So the email, I may be getting 6 or 7 emails right now, and I know nothing about them, because I'm just going, okay, I don't even see them, because right now this is my priority, is doing this. And in a moment right now, I guess I'm looking at it too, to compare this to, I've got my chat window open. So for me, that's a manage in this moment. I'm not only doing what I've got going here, but the chat quotes that are coming through are important and they're urgent. So I have to manage both of those, in addition to kind of managing the presentation and looking at my screen as well to see how folks are reacting and responding. So it's all kind of take to a different location depending on where. But the important thing in this about, where are you this work through, what do you have to manage, and what might you be able to avoid, or what might you need to limit, or what needs to be your focus in this particular moment.
And I would add to, we look at these quadrants and they look very nice and neat and organized. And as Will said, there's definitely a level of interconnectedness and bleed over with those boxes. And one of the comments previously in the chat was, our perspective and our opinions influence how we define that and our situations and our reality. Very few things in the world of development in general are one size fits all. And this is definitely a situation where, these are shaped like boxes, but nobody's fitting into one of these boxes beautifully. It's that perspective, that opinion, and our circumstances that we all have that add context to these boxes and how we arrive at them, how we define them, and what that looks and sounds like given each individual reality. So these are overarching best practices and mindsets really to adopt as to how we think through our tasks and our to-do lists and what our circumstances provide for us in terms of the context, to get to that place of discernment, intentional, strategic discernment as to how we prioritize all the roles and all the tasks that we're responsible for right now.
All right. So as we continue on, we're kind of looking at this this screen more was kind of a personal context, if you will. So I'm going to ask us to kind of shift our attention a little bit and shift our focus, if you will. So on the things that kind of what we're dealing with and what we're interacting with and what we're experiencing as it relates to these professional expectations we now have. That are so much different for some of us and so much more fluid for others, so much more impacted by other things. Okay, our professional life is very susceptible now to so many things that are going on in our home lives. So think about these sections now in the context of what are our professional obligations and what kind of things can we do to help us prioritize through what we're doing in our jobs right now. So in this first quadrant, this is that urgent and important, or important and urgent section. These are typically the things that get taken or brought to us. They're pressing tasks. We need to deal with this immediately or right away. These tend to be crises that erupt. Those things that kind of come up and catch us by surprise, maybe short deadline responsibilities or assignments. There's the notion of firefighting you could associate with this first quadrant. So these are things that demand or require or expect our immediate attention. Things that we have to interact with in the moment, and things that require a large attention shift from where we may have been into this other responsibility. So have you seen things like this that have come up for you as we've settled into this a little bit more? And I'll ask you to share those experiences with us. And you don't have to give us words or names, or hard details, but if you've got some things, please let us know what they are.
This is Brooke, and I had something today. I took my lunch at the grocery store and got a text in the middle of it, and then a phone call, and had to address it right away. So that was something that is an example of something that I did have to drop what I was doing. When I saw who was calling, I realized, okay, I need to answer that. So for me, it's knowing this person doesn't call me unless there's something that's urgent, and really trying to keep that in mind and manage that. However, I can't guarantee that if it wasn't that person, I wouldn't have answered it anyway, since I don't know the difference between urgent and important sometimes.
Thank you, Brooke. Yeah, sometimes the name, is that with you and your family? What comes through on this thing makes, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to need to get. it's the inescapable truth is there's something that's important on the other side of that phone call, and I need to find the time and the moment to give some attention to that.
Hey, Brooke, please redeem my good name and say which one of those I fall into since
Oh, it wasn't you that called, Izetta. When yours comes up, I just hit decline. Just kidding.
There you go. There you
Actually,
go.
Izetta, I would probably answer yours because you don't call me frequently, and so I, in all seriousness, though, I probably would answer your call. I likely would. I don't want to say probably. I would answer your call.
The hole keeps getting bigger. No, but that's true. There's truth to that. Is Izetta, I'll look at you and I'm looking at my screen. I don't get many calls from Izetta, who's my executive director. I don't. So when it does come through, I think okay, this is something that needs my attention, because she's not gonna call me repeatedly day after day after day. When she calls, there is something worth navigating and worth getting into. So I understand that. I love the chats. Yeah, and for me personally, this moment hit me where my personal life, or my home life, and my professional life come together at 2 minutes till 1 o'clock. The UPS truck pulls up in the driveway, and they had said they were here yesterday. I'm telling you, that's what they said, that they didn't drop anything off. And so I had to call them last night, and they redelivered. So I'm tearing down the steps, hoping I don't fall on my way to be there so I could collect the UPS packages, and they didn't get taken somewhere else, and then shooting back up here in time for this session. So that's for me, that was that important, and that was that urgent. And both of these things kind of combined or hit me at the same time, right around 1 o'clock today. So thank you. None of you knew that either, did you? I did a good job of that. Okay. All right. Anything else about number 1? Oh, I guess, yeah, I want to think about this for a minute too. What happens when we operate under number 1? Thank you. I almost overlooked that. What happens when we operate consistently, frequently, and often in that number 1?
You burn out.
Yes, exactly. You know, I'll be honest with you, I got a couple of notes here. I want to make sure I hit points, and so I almost forgot about that one. But those are the 2 words, exactly: stress and burnout. It's a constant battle to try and keep up. Mentally worn out, fatigue, yes. So this is why we hope to look at these quadrants, and we think about what it is we're operating in, and how we're operating in those, and how often we're operating in those, and what works for us in that moment, and how we can best prioritize ourselves so we don't operate under number 1.
Hey, Will,
Yeah.
if I might add, and as we're working on managing for ourselves, sometimes things outside of our control come into play, and other people's habits come into play, and it's putting us in the position of not just managing our own, but managing others as well. So finding a way at some way to maybe educate others as to how to prioritize and how to manage, and educating them, maybe asking the question, how urgent is this, or is this a needed now, or can this be done tomorrow? Otherwise, then we will be subject to someone else's crises and pressing problems, which would make it even more difficult for us to manage in that quadrant.
And I connect that back to one of our previous sessions that we did, where we talked about telecommuting best practices. I believe that's the one it was. And it goes back to that word boundaries that we've already seen in the chat thus far, and having those kind but candid conversations. Because again, we're all navigating multiple roles. We're all defining what's important and urgent differently, and understanding that those bad habits don't just impact one person, they impact multiple people, because then when we turn around and respond to that firefighting, you know, what are we being taken away from? What other needs are not being met? So the impact is far greater than just that one email or that one phone call or that one text. And that stress and that burnout, what we know is we go to that very emotionally charged place very quickly. And it's hard to then sift through the emotion to get to logic and how to best address the situation or best handle what's being kind of thrown at us in those moments. So we're not operating as our best self. We're not thinking through it as diligently, and that active discernment that we talked about earlier becomes increasingly difficult, because at that point we just want to put out the fire and try to get back to what we were doing before. So being able to have those kind but candid conversations with our colleagues and other professionals, again, in a way that is kind, but in a way that also helps, if nothing else, clarify our circumstances and clarify those boundaries, and come to some, not mutual agreement, mutual understanding of the situation, and in hopes that it impacts behavior, um, but also gives us the freedom to put words to those situations.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to quadrant number 2. And we're talking about professional, in an ideal world, be the place we because this is the place where you can do that long range planning, that real goal development, that growth, that opportunity, that learning, thinking about the overall picture and how it all plays into what we're attempting to do. This is where most of our attention should focus, again, in an ideal world, because this is where we improve our practice. This is where we improve ourselves. This is where we improve what we're doing for other people, in service of other people. Now, in this context, in this environment, I don't know how much time we have to truly do some of that. Some of us may have more time. Some of us may have less time to do that. But even when we're reacting, I guess, let me start here. The place I want to get to is that when we're in number 1, it robs us from number 2. Okay. Number 1 takes our time away from number 2. So when we're operating in that crisis mode continually, we're not able to spend the time we could spend or need to spend on truly improving what we're doing, improving our practice, growing in some sense, even through this kind of work that we're doing right now. There are opportunities to investigate other things and other ways to do our work. Reading we can do, trying our best to discern what's a better way to do the work we currently do, even though we're not in the office with it right now. But when we are responding or reacting in those number 1 moments, that's what tends to harm and get in the way of this improvement that we can do in number 2, in this number 2 focus, which is on our strategies and truly our values and what we're trying to accomplish. I see a quote here: if we make everything important and urgent, we'll not have the energy to use our critical thinking skills and be able to focus on strategies and values. Exactly. Those firefighting moments rob us from the ability to think and to plan and be proactive as opposed to reactive. What are some of the results? Well, I kind of hit on it a little bit already, but the results on number 2 is, if we don't focus on, or these have long-term impact. So if we can focus in this number 2 area, we make long-term impact. This is where that visionary work comes in. This is where we can truly get to the point of planning and developing ourselves and developing our work. Have you had opportunities to focus on this type of thing while we've been in this situation? Has anybody had the opportunity to do some focus work in vision or strategic areas?
I have before the pandemic, and this is Jessica. Hi, Will and Jeannie and everyone else. Before the pandemic, Jeannie and I had our first meeting for career coaching, and we had talked about mission and vision and goals for our LAF team. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to cancel the rest of the meetings. But I did take the opportunity to ask my staff to be thinking about a mission and vision and goals for our LAF team. And I took the time to reflect as well and think about these things, wrote it down. Effective May 4th, I have a new department head. And so I took the opportunity to draft an email and share with him what I thought ideas for our mission, vision, and goals were, and even ran the idea past him about potentially having a web page for our LAF team so that we can express these things to our clients and our stakeholders. So, and then we've been doing some team building by Zoom and other things like that. So we have to look at the positive in everything, and the pandemic has not been all bad for our team.
Thank you, Jessica. That's good. It's good to know. I mean, because I don't want this to limit. And when I say this, I'm looking at my screen and all these faces, and it has to be through Zoom and all that. You know, we don't want this to limit us from what we're doing and what we're able to do and what we want to attempt to do, even though this isn't necessarily the ideal way to do it. And if we could do it in person, it may take, and I'm picking a day, it may take 3 months. Doing it through this may take 3.5 or 4 months or even 5 months. I don't know. But the very notion that you're giving it attention and you're continuing to maintain some focus on those strategies and values, that's great, and I appreciate that, and I'm so glad that that's the case. We don't want those crises, and we don't want this moment to rob us of those opportunities. So I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you. Okay. Number 3 in the quadrants, interruptions and busy work. These can truly also clog up our day. They don't have, I don't think, the emotional impact so much that the crises or firefightings, the number 1s have, but they still have the ability to push us left or push us right from where we're trying to head and what we're trying to accomplish. But I really want to think about what are the things that are getting in the way of those number 2s. These tend to be classified, I guess, as interruptions. And if we stopped ourselves at the end of the week and we kind of totaled up some of this stuff and looked at our week and thought, what did we spend our time on? I think a lot of this would truly fall into that case as well. These don't necessarily happen to be those moments that need immediate attention, but they are the things that tend to distract us from some of the work we're trying to accomplish. Excuse me for a second while I check something. I got lost in my thought. Okay, yeah, these also will distract us from that visionary, that number 2 work. And a lot of these things, while they don't tend to be immediate and need our immediate attention, they can lead to a notion of some lack of control, if you will, that these are things that these are things that aren't necessarily things that are valuable to my specific work, but may also be valuable to others. But how do we manage that moment, and how do we avoid just those things that kind of bump us left and bump us right and keep us from from focusing on the work we're trying to accomplish while we focus or attempt to do that number two work also, or that second quadrant work, I guess I should say. Okay. Let me see, how am I doing on time? Okay. All right. And then number 4, this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is the one that I struggled with a little bit earlier as I prepped for today. Because you see on these things, it says limit time wasting professionally. If we think about this truly in the context of what we're doing professionally and what we're doing as a part of our job, these will obviously get in the way. There's no doubt about it. But if we think about the context of what we're going through socially, the demands on our time, the demands on this integration of our home and professional life, these are things that can be valuable to us on that personal side, that re-energized side. They're the things that can truly help us. But if we fall into these places during what we consider our work time, then obviously you can see that these will truly be nothing but a waste of time if we're focusing on them or paying attention to them in a professional context or during our professional time.
And I connect this as well. Yesterday in the telecommuting with children session, we talked about taking care of ourselves in order to be able to take care of our children and our families, and that giving ourselves permission for self-care. And sometimes we have to recognize that we need that disconnect. We need that mindless activity to be able to recharge. So when Will says it's a positive thing sometimes, that it's not something that's going to always get in the way. We have to be able to recognize when our body needs that, when our mind needs that. And I think we also have to be very intentional with labeling it as self-care. There's a difference between wasting time and taking care of ourselves. And again, it goes back to that active discernment of what do I need right now? Versus what do I want? Do I want to do something mindless or to avoid what I'm needing to get done? Or is my body really telling me I need some self-care? I need a break. I need to disconnect and recharge somehow. And maybe it is through that mindless activity or that TV show that just makes me laugh and brings me some fun and some family time, whatever that need is. And the words that I'm choosing to use during this time for myself and encouraging others to use is, how can we provide grace and space? So extending that grace to each other when we need that time, and not viewing or judging someone else's need for time as anything other than just, I need to provide them that grace. Not assuming that someone else is wasting time if they're not responding to my email or they're not engaging in my firefighting when I want them to. How I can provide them grace to do that. I can provide them space to do that. I can also provide myself space when I need that. And it really connects back to those boundaries, that candid, open conversations we were having with individuals. But I would encourage us to think about how we extend grace and how we extend space to others and to ourselves, and not always view these things as wasting time. Now, I can absolutely be guilty of wasting time with these things. But is it a response to my need, or is it a response to just what I want to do, or an avoidance tactic?
Yeah, if we think about how your work days are going, and now we've had a little bit of time to settle into them, and maybe you've got some sort of a pattern developed, and you know that, okay, I start at this time, and I usually take a break at this time, and then I have my lunch at this time, and I get up and stretch at this time. Just limit that type of thing, the mindless activity, the Facebook, the Twitters, and all that kind of stuff. Limit that during those times that's when you feel like you've been most productive during the day. As it relates to your job and your work. Now, like I said, when 5 o'clock hits or whatever your time is that you're done and you've turned off all your equipment and you've walked out of your space and you say, my day is done. If it means getting on Facebook and scrolling, that's fine. You go for it. Just think about, as you do that during your cadence or during your work time, You know, remember how easy it is to get lost in that. And there have been times when I'm not working, but I've been there and I've scrolled, and the next thing you know, it's 45 minutes later, and I've just been poking around the internet looking for this or looking for that, you know, checking on a used car, or who knows what it is, whatever I happen to be looking for. And I realize, and I look up and I go, gosh, I've been at this for a little while. And that whole notion of time kind of disappears as we get lost in those moments. So just be aware of those kinds of things. So they will rob your time, and we do have the ability to truly lose the sense of time when those things are going on and those things are happening.
And we'll continue to reinforce as well how important it is for us to analyze our days. Um, what times during the day can we be most productive? And that's really that cadence that Will was talking about. It's one of the pieces we talked about in the communication session, to where we can prioritize, like, okay, from 2 to 4, I got some good solid time that I can usually grind things out. So at that time, making sure that I'm trying to, like, not have my phone available for things like Facebook, or that the TV is not on. So I'm really using that time wisely and prioritizing what I can get done, because I know that's a time of my day that is less interrupted, seems to be more intentional with my focus, with my efforts. So really continuing to, as these days can evolve, you know, we used to say in the office, no 2 days are the same, and it's great. And that's still true. No 2 days are the same. It's just a whole lot different. And so understanding that, but also continuing to be reflective and analytical of our day and our productivity time, and how we can use that cadence as truly a strategy for helping us limit these things. Because it's easy, it's available, but it can also be a negative distraction if we let it.
All right. So hopefully, as we've worked through these modified, adapted, if you will, 4 quadrants, we've talked about and identified how thoughtful priorities can lead to getting the right things done, because that's truly what we're all should be interested in, not just doing work, but doing the right kind of work and the right work at the right time. We've talked a fair amount about how this creates effective, hopefully, and productive work days. And then again, the moment being now, moving from this moment that we have in this environment that we're working on in Zoom, to how are we going to apply these practices to that next round of emails we get, to that next round of phone calls we get, to that next couple of text messages we may end up with, that next Zoom meeting we attend. How are we going to truly apply some of these things to help us get through those moments, avoid those firefightings, avoid that burnout and that stress, try our best to focus on things that are truly going to help us make a larger impact, which does take time and does take planning. Hopefully minimize some of those interruptions, or the impact that those interruptions have on us, and then also minimize and reflect on the time we're spending with things that truly have the ability or the opportunity to waste our time during our work and during our productive hours, that we're trying to get our work accomplished, and save that stuff for those re-energized times when we walk away from our space for 10 or 15 minutes at a time, or we leave for the rest of the day. Okay. So as we've talked about this and as we've thought through this, I guess I'll ask the question now. We'll open it up for any comments you guys have, or the ability or the opportunity here for you to say, this has changed my thinking a little bit, or this is how I'm going to approach this next time, or when I try to apply, this is what I might try to accomplish the next opportunity I have. So feel free to unmute your mics at this point and let us know.
This has been helpful to me with regard to just compartmentalizing the 4 quadrants. And off the top of my head, the perhaps what I can do is modify my to-do list a little bit and try to put them into buckets of the quadrants. So, and that's just off the top of my head, but I work well with a to-do list, and I have a system of trying to divide them up by urgency and importance. However, I appreciate the quadrant that you sent. I think that's going to be really helpful in just refining it further and trying to improve my skill in that area.
Thank you, Brooke. Yeah, I mean, you know, even as I think about a notion of a to-do list, you could have items 1 through 10, and then number 11 is something like revisit something you've put off earlier today. You know, when you think about how you'd work through that. But yeah, that's great. I mean, lists are fantastic. Lists are great. Nothing wrong with them. They keep you on track, and they help you get your things done with the understanding that, you know, something may jump in. Instead of a 1, 2, 3, you now got a 1, 2, 2A, 2B, 3, all those kinds of things, and help yourself manage those moments. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, crossing that list, putting that checkbox next to it. We love those. We love those feelings. All right.
Sometimes I put things on my list just to cross them off.
My list starts with get up. Boom, done. All right. Oh, okay. Okay, there you go. We have 3x5 index cards as well. People love a good list. All right, that's great. That's great. Use those lists to help prioritize and keep those things in those areas to help get you through your days. And remind you of what you hope to accomplish and what those things are that are important for you during the day. Very good. All right. Well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I've got 201 on my computer screen, which I believe means you all have 201 on your computer screens too. So if there are any other comments or questions, feel free to throw them up in chat or type them up in chat as we close. But what I want to do is thank you all again for being here. We do, as I said earlier, appreciate your attendance in these sessions we're doing. And please visit the website, HR website, COVID-19 telecommuting resources, and you'll see all the things we have there for you as well. And I appreciate those that we're seeing that are repeat customers. It's always glad to see your names and your faces again and again. So thank you all very much. That's all I have. If you need anything else from us, please